Okay, let's dive into this. Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are exploring what's widely considered to be the absolute fiercest, most intense rivalry in world football, period. I'm talking about Boca Juniors versus River Plate. Now, this isn't just a match, guys. This is a massive spectacle that literally commands the attention of over 70% of Argentina's entire population. It's this defining clash of South American football that you just have to see it to believe it.
To truly wrap your head around the sheer magnitude of this rivalry, you really have to look way beyond the 90 minutes on the pitch. People have famously described this clash as a civil war in a jersey. And honestly, they're not exaggerating. This is an event that quite literally divides families, it brings entire cities to a grinding halt, and it captures the absolute soul of Argentina. We're talking about a bitter blood feud that's been raging for well over a century. When these two teams meet, the tension in the air, it's so thick you could cut it with a knife. The noise is absolutely deafening, and I mean, the ground literally shakes under your feet.
Section 1. The most dangerous derby.
Right, so to see just how explosive this rivalry can get, we don't even have to look that far back. Let's look at 2018. Boca and River were facing off in the final of the Copa Libertadores. Now, for context, that's basically South America's equivalent to the Champions League. It was heavily billed as the final to end all finals. The stakes couldn't have been higher. But on the Saturday of the second leg, the match didn't even start. En route to River Plate Stadium, the Boca Juniors team bus was violently ambushed by River fans. The visiting players were hit with tear gas, flying projectiles, the whole 9 yards. Boca's captain, Pablo Perez, actually had to be hospitalized with a severe eye injury. The sheer, terrifying madness of this situation forced authorities to completely abandon the match in Buenos Aires, and get this, they ultimately relocated South America's biggest game to a completely different continent. They ended up playing it in Madrid, Spain. Absolutely wild.
Section 2. A tale of two classes. Let's move to and see how this builds.
To really grasp the absolute fire of today's rivalry, we need to go back in time. We need to go back to a time when these two bitter enemies were actually sharing the exact same streets. It's true. Their shared origin is just fascinating. Both of these clubs were actually born in the exact same neighborhood, La Boca. This was a vibrant, really tough working-class dockland in Buenos Aires, mostly populated by Italian immigrants at the time. River Plate was founded right there in 1901, and Boca Juniors followed up right next door in 1905. And hey, the very first official Superclásico? That went down in 1913, with River taking a 2-1 win. But here is the massive turning point. The single moment that permanently encoded this rivalry's DNA happened in 1925. That's the year River Plate decided to pack up their things and relocate north to the affluent, super wealthy district of Núñez. That one geographical move, it forged a deep socio-economic divide that still heavily defines both clubs to this very day.
And this brilliantly illustrates exactly how those differing paths really shape their identities. It's like night and day. On one side, you've got Boca Juniors. They stayed put in La Boca. They fiercely embraced their working-class immigrant roots. Their fans proudly call themselves Los Cenices or Bosteros, totally wearing their humble heritage like a badge of honor. They play in La Bombonera, the famously intimidating, super steep-sided stadium they call the Chocolate Box. And their whole football philosophy is built on garra. That translates to pure grit, claw, and just relentless willpower. Now on the other side of town, River Plate represents the affluent upper class. Their wealthy financial backers actually earned them the nickname Los Millonarios, literally the millionaires. They play in this massive grand amphitheater called El Monumental, and their historic style, it's known as La Máquina, or the machine. It's all about elegant, technical, beautiful, free-flowing football.
So what we're looking at here is that football in Argentina became way more than just a game. It basically became a direct mirror of the people. Back in the day, as diverse waves of immigrants were flooding into the country, there wasn't really a cohesive national identity yet. So these football clubs stepped in. They became these incredibly deep, powerful symbols of belonging. Throughout the 20th century, amidst all this economic instability and political unrest, the sport morphed into a highly visible battleground for class tensions. The Superclásico essentially became the ultimate arena. It was where the working class and the wealthy could clash, literally airing out the deep societal fractures of the Argentine nation right there on the football pitch.
Section 3. Crossing the bitter divide.
Now, with a rivalry this incredibly intense and deeply divided, you kind of have to wonder, what about the players who actually dared to switch sides? It sounds like a death wish, right? But believe it or not, despite the sheer unfiltered hostility between these fan bases, over 100 players have actually crossed this dangerous divide during their careers. No way, right? But it's true. We're talking about some absolute legends of the game, too. Oscar Ruggeri, who won the World Cup in '86, he went directly from Boca to River in 1985. The legendary striker Gabriel Batistuta played for River in '89 before jumping straight to Boca the very next year. And Claudio Caniggia started at River in the '80s, only to return to Argentina years later to star for Boca. I mean, just imagine being part of the most ferocious derby in world football and having the sheer nerve to step onto the pitch wearing both of those jerseys.
But listen, even when players stay fiercely loyal, the on-pitch mockery is absolutely relentless. Let me give you a perfect example. Take Boca Juniors icon Carlos Tevez during the 2004 Copa Libertadores semifinals. Now, a bit of context. River Plate had this super insulting nickname imposed on them by Boca fans, Las Gallinas, which translates to the chickens. This came from a perceived habit of them choking during a historic trophy drought. Well, after scoring a crucial goal in that 2004 match, Tevez notoriously celebrated by performing a literal chicken dance right in front of the furious River supporters. Yeah, he actually did that. Of course, it earned him an immediate red card, but you know what? Boca still managed to hold on and win on penalties, basically searing that incredibly inflammatory moment into Superclásico folklore forever.
Section 4. The Tragedy of Gate 12.
Now, we need to shift gears for a moment to a much darker chapter, one that really highlights the devastating and deeply tragic human cost of this fierce rivalry. 71. That is the official number of lives lost on June 23, 1968, in what still remains the absolute worst disaster in Argentine sports history. 70 Boca Juniors fans were crushed to death in a stampede as they tried to exit El Monumental Stadium after a match. And honestly, the most heartbreaking detail of all this, the average age of those victims was just 19 years old. Just kids, really.
The events of that terrible day are known as the Tragedy of Porta 12, or Gate 12, and they remain shrouded in this haunting mystery and lingering pain. Basically, following a 0-0 draw, this massive crowd of exiting Boca fans suddenly found their exit door inexplicably obstructed, and what followed was just a horrific human crush. Now, there are very strong suspicions, along with eyewitness accounts, suggesting federal police malpractice. People claim that officers stationed outside the stadium were violently assaulting departing fans, which caused a panicked and deadly retreat back into the dark stairwell. Yet somehow, after a massive 3-year government investigation, absolutely no one was found responsible. No one. This total lack of accountability resulted in decades of painful, complete silence from both the authorities and the football clubs themselves.
For decades, this tragedy was basically treated as a taboo subject. You just didn't talk about it. For a lot of Boca fans, it became this glaring, painful symbol of the authorities' total disregard for working-class matchgoers. And incredibly, it took until 2018, we're talking 50 years after the disaster, for Boca Juniors to formally step up and ask their own fans for forgiveness for forgetting the victims, finally committing to truly honor their memory. And River Plate, they'd only just installed a memorial plaque 10 years prior to that. It's a stark, heavy reminder of the true human cost here.
Section 5. Rule of the Barras Bravas.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is it helps us understand why this rivalry still remains on such a violent knife edge today. We really have to pull back the curtain and unmask the shadowy organizations operating behind the scenes. We're talking about the Barras Bravas. Now, outsiders often mistakenly view these guys as just passionate, hardcore football hooligans, right? Just rowdy fans. But they are, in fact, highly organized fan groups that operate as powerful criminal syndicates. They use orchestrated violence to control territories and heavily influence football club politics. Make no mistake, we are talking about deeply entrenched mafias operating right out in the open on the terraces.
The sheer scale of their underworld operations is staggering. We're talking about since the 1930s. These groups have been deeply involved in major crimes, money laundering, drug trafficking, extortion, and yes, even orchestrating organized violence and targeted murders. Like back in 1983, when 5 different Barras from various clubs were literally shot to death in separate instances. And the crazy thing is, they do not operate in a vacuum, not at all. Political party committees and club officials actually actively collude with them. It works like this. Politicians and club presidents grant the Barras free tickets, funding, and resources. In exchange, the Barras mobilize their members to vote for these officials in club elections. They also serve as a brutal intimidation tool. They'll physically and verbally attack opposing candidates, rival fans, and sometimes even the players themselves.
If you look at investigative interviews, the heads of Boca's famous Barra Brava, a group known as La 12, they actually describe their organization not as a fan club, but as a rigid hierarchy. It's incredibly structured. They state they have 3 people at the absolute top, 4 or 5 right below them, and then layers of 10s and 20s below that. They say it very clearly. First, you become a fan of the fans. It's a school. We all start from the bottom, so everyone knows how it works. It is a highly systematized chain of command, and it ensures absolute loyalty and, frankly, terrifying control over the stadiums.
So the crucial point is that this violent structure didn't just survive entirely on its own. It was actively tolerated by those in power. Just listen to this astonishing quote from a director of the Argentine Football Association all the way back in 1971. When he was asked about stadium violence, he actually said, "Emotional release is healthy. Bottles will always fly above the heads of the referees, and all we can do is moderate that aggressiveness." Historically, authorities literally viewed stadium violence as a necessary pressure valve, a way for the working class to unload all the frustrations of their difficult week. And this deep-seated institutional tolerance, it's exactly what allowed the Barras Bravas to flourish completely unchecked for decades.
Section 6. The ultimate question.
As we wrap up this explainer, we're really left to grapple with the intense duality of this historic rivalry. We have to ask ourselves, is the fierce passion of the Superclásico really worth the violent cost? Because on one hand, this match is a beautiful, globally commercialized spectacle. It captures a pure, unfiltered passion that you rarely see anywhere else on Earth. It's an enduring, vibrant, beating heart of Argentine society. But, on the other hand, it carries a very, very dark reality. It's a reality built on deep socioeconomic divides, the terrifying rule of organized criminal syndicates, and a devastating human toll, like we saw with the tragedy of Gate 12 and the utter chaos of the 2018 final. Does the breathtaking football justify that heavy societal cost? It's a profound question that lingers over every single match between these two giants, and it challenges all of us to look closely at the true price of the world's deepest rivalry. Well, thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope this gave you a whole new perspective on Boca Juniors and River Plate. I will see you next time as we continue to unpack the fascinating stories behind the headlines.